In the vibrant city of Austin, Texas, an unimaginable chain of events began to unravel, leaving an indelible mark on the lives of 3 women and 1 respected doctor. A storm of lies, jealousy, and dangerous obsessions spiraled out of control, ultimately leading to a murder that stunned the entire community. This is the story of Dr. Jack Matthews, a young, accomplished doctor, brilliant, attractive, and only 27 years old, whose life came to a tragic and unforeseen end in an affair that consumed him. In the spring of 2009, Dr. Matthews was emerging from a dark chapter in his personal life. For the past year, he had been entangled in a toxic relationship that drained him emotionally. The woman he had been with brought out the worst in him. Fights, manipulation, and endless mistrust had defined their time together, wearing him down in ways that were invisible to the outside world. It left him with wounds far deeper than anyone could see. But when the relationship finally ended, he was determined to move forward. Though his heart was heavy, he focused on his career and distanced himself from the emotional turmoil. Dr. Matthews was a rising star, one of the most promising doctors at a prestigious Austin hospital. His brilliance and charisma made him stand out among his peers, and his reputation was soaring both among his colleagues and the patients whose lives he touched. Jack had always been ambitious. Even from a young age, he had dreamed of becoming a doctor. His parents had instilled in him a sense of hard work and dedication. Growing up in a middle-class family, he watched his mother work long hours as a nurse while his father juggled 2 jobs to support the family. Despite the struggles, they provided him with everything he needed to succeed. Jack excelled in school and, by his early 20s, had become the first in his family to attend medical school. The long hours, endless studying, and grueling internships were worth it when he finally became a doctor. Now, at 27, he was determined to continue rising through the ranks of the medical field. Despite his career success, Jack was emotionally exhausted. The toxic relationship he had left behind had drained him of the energy to engage in anything serious. He wanted freedom and enjoyment, not the weight of commitment. His focus had shifted completely to his work and enjoying life. So, when his female patients began showing interest in him, Jack welcomed the attention, relishing the distraction they provided from the loneliness he secretly felt. Samantha Davis, a 20-year-old college student, was the first to catch his eye. Samantha had been a carefree, lively girl all her life. Growing up as the youngest in a family of 4, she was used to getting attention and had always thrived on it. She was studying literature at a local university, a passion that had filled her with dreams of writing a novel someday. But an injury during a hiking trip in May 2009 brought her to Dr. Matthews' office. Her ankle had twisted awkwardly and she needed a quick checkup. Jack, ever professional, treated her, but something in the way he listened to her every word, his calm and reassuring demeanor, sparked an interest in her. It wasn't long before Samantha found reasons to stay around longer after her appointment, lingering with idle conversation. She felt a connection with him, one she hadn't felt with anyone else before. For her, Jack was an escape from the routine of university life. He was older, wiser, and more mature than the boy she was used to. She wasn't looking for anything serious either. She just wanted to enjoy the thrill of being with someone exciting. By mid-June, their relationship had blossomed into something carefree. They spent time together, enjoying the fleeting excitement of each other's company, without the need for labels or expectations. While Jack was casually enjoying his time with Samantha, his life took another unexpected turn when he met Rachel Evans, a 30-year-old single mother. Rachel's life had been anything but easy. At 18, she had fallen in love with her high school sweetheart, believing they would build a life together. They married young, and soon after she had a son. But things didn't go as planned. Her husband, a charming man when they first met, quickly became distant, focusing more on his work than his family. By the time their son was 5, the marriage had completely unraveled. Rachel was left to raise her son alone, juggling work as a real estate agent and motherhood. Her days were long, and her nights were even longer. While she had friends, none of them truly understood the weight she carried as a single mother. Every decision she made was for her son. By 2009, her son was 8 years old, and though Rachel had made a life for them, she felt an emptiness that she tried to ignore. When she met Jack in the summer of 2009, it wasn't under romantic circumstances. She brought her son in for a routine checkup, and Jack was his doctor. It had been a stressful day for her, and when Jack spoke to her with such empathy, asking questions about her life and her son, Rachel felt seen for the first time in a long time. Unlike Samantha, who was carefree and young, Rachel longed for stability. She wasn't looking for a casual fling, but hoped that Jack, with his intelligence and maturity, might be the man who could step into her life and fill the void. They began seeing each other more frequently, with Rachel finding reasons to come by the hospital. She told herself it was nothing serious, that she was just enjoying the company, but deep down she began to hope for more. By late August 2009, Rachel had fallen deeply for Jack. She saw him as the kind of man who could take care of her and her son, the kind of man she could build a future with, but Jack, still healing from his own emotional wounds, wasn't ready for that kind of commitment. He continued to juggle his casual relationship with Samantha and his deepening bond with Rachel, unaware of the emotional turmoil that would soon follow. As the summer turned to fall, the lines between Jack's relationships blurred. What began as a carefree fling with Samantha and a deeper connection with Rachel would soon become more complicated than Jack had ever anticipated. The growing tension, jealousy, and unspoken expectations would ultimately set the stage for the tragedy that none of them could foresee. In the spring of 2010, Jack's life, which had once seemed so exciting and free, took an unexpected and dangerous turn. It was the season when he met Natalie Williams, a whirlpool of obsession and destruction. Natalie, at 25 years old, was recently married to Tom Williams, a successful businessman. From the outside, their marriage seemed perfect. Natalie, a beautiful and poised woman from an influential family, and Tom, a well-known and respected figure in the business world. However, beneath the surface, their marriage was strained, held together by nothing more than social expectations and appearances. Tom, distant and emotionally unavailable, spent more time in boardrooms than with his wife. Natalie, feeling increasingly isolated, sought comfort elsewhere. When Natalie first walked into Jack's office for a routine checkup in April 2010, the chemistry between them was instantaneous. There was something magnetic about Jack that drew her in. He was young, confident, and gave her the attention she craved but lacked at home. Jack, still in his casual phase, saw no harm in flirting with her, unaware of her marriage. They began spending time together. What started as a few innocent appointments turned into something much more intimate. Rachel Evans, on the other hand, was not handling things well. By the summer of 2010, she had already developed a strong emotional attachment to Jack. She thought of him as more than just a passing fling. In her mind, Jack could be the one who would finally give her the life she had longed for, a stable home for her and her son. When she noticed that Jack had been spending time with Natalie, Rachel's world began to crumble. Unlike Samantha, who remained detached and indifferent to Jack's other relationships, Rachel felt a deep sense of betrayal. She couldn't understand why Jack would be interested in someone else when he had her. In July 2010, Rachel confronted Jack. She told him that she knew about Natalie and the mere mention of her name caused a shift in their relationship. Rachel didn't care to hide her jealousy or her emotions, but Jack, thinking that things between him and Natalie were casual, brushed Rachel's concerns aside. He told her that there was nothing serious between him and Natalie, that he didn't even know she was married, and that Rachel had nothing to worry about. But Rachel could see through him. Every time Jack dismissed her feelings, the sense of betrayal grew stronger. She could feel him slipping away and her hold on him weakening. By the end of 2010, Jack was more involved with Natalie than he had ever planned to be. The thrill of the affair excited him, and Natalie's charm made it easy to overlook the potential consequences. Natalie, despite being married, had no intention of ending things with Jack either. She found in him what she couldn't find at home: passion, attention, and escape from her emotionally vacant marriage. Meanwhile, Tom, oblivious to the affair, continued with his life, too caught up in his work to notice the cracks forming in his relationship. By August 2011, Rachel's frustration had reached a breaking point. She had spent more than a year watching Jack drift further and further away from her, losing the emotional connection she had desperately tried to build. It was at a hospital charity event in early August that things took a dark turn. Rachel saw Jack and Natalie together, laughing, looking like they belonged to a world that didn't include her. That moment solidified her fears, and she knew she needed to do something about it. Driven by jealousy, Rachel began investigating Natalie's life. She discovered that Natalie was not just a random woman. She was married to Tom Williams, a man with deep connections in the business world and the local community. Natalie's marriage wasn't just a small detail. It was a secret that could destroy not only Jack but also Natalie's entire life. Rachel now had the power to expose the affair, and she intended to use it. By late August, Rachel sent an anonymous email to Tom. The message was brief, but direct, revealing everything about Natalie's ongoing affair with Jack. The words hit Tom like a sledgehammer. He had suspected that something was off in his marriage, but he had never imagined the extent of Natalie's betrayal. Tom spiraled into depression, his mind consumed with thoughts of revenge. His life, which had been neatly arranged and organized, now felt like it was crumbling around him. He withdrew from his work, avoided his friends, and spent hours alone, consumed by the thought that Jack had destroyed his marriage. While Tom was slipping into a dark emotional state, Natalie's life began to unravel as well. Tom confronted her about the affair, and although she tried to deny it at first, the weight of guilt overwhelmed her. Their marriage, already hanging by a thread, collapsed under the pressure of the truth. Natalie, once poised and composed, found herself trapped between two men, one she had vowed to love and the other who had made her feel alive again. But now it was all slipping away. On March 6, 2012, everything came crashing down. Dr. Jack Matthews was found dead in his home. The scene was horrific. He had been brutally stabbed multiple times, his body lying in a pool of blood in the living room. The crime scene showed signs of a struggle, indicating that Jack had tried to fight off his attacker, but the assault had been too violent. The police, arriving at the scene early that morning, immediately began piecing together the details. The next day, March 8, 2012, the police questioned both Rachel and Natalie. Natalie was in shock, barely able to process the news of Jack's murder. She denied any involvement, though her guilt over the affair was apparent. Rachel, on the other hand, was noticeably erratic. Her emotions fluctuated between sadness and anger, and the police couldn't ignore how unsettled she seemed. However, neither woman could provide any concrete evidence that linked them to the murder. As the investigation unfolded, the police turned their attention to Tom Williams. Tom appeared cooperative at first, showing the expected signs of grief and confusion. But as the police dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing pattern. In the weeks leading up to Jack's murder, had received threatening phone calls and messages. The tone of the messages was aggressive, warning him to stay away from certain people. The calls traced back to Tom placed him as the prime suspect. The discovery of these messages painted a clear picture of Tom's mental state. He had descended into madness, consumed by the idea that Jack had destroyed his life. His obsession with revenge had grown over time, until it led him to Jack's doorstep on the night of March 6th, where he committed the ultimate act of violence. What had started as a carefree affair had now ended in bloodshed, leaving behind broken lives and a shattered community. The investigation was far from over, but the police knew they were closing in on the truth. A truth that would expose the dark depths of human obsession, jealousy, and betrayal. On March 20th, 2012, the investigation reached its climax. After weeks of gathering evidence and chasing down every lead, the police finally had what they needed to arrest Tom Williams. They had suspected his involvement from the moment they uncovered the threatening messages and late-night calls directed at Jack. But it wasn't until they found Tom's fingerprints on the murder weapon, a kitchen knife, that their suspicions were confirmed. It had taken meticulous work, but the pieces were finally falling into place. When the police arrived at Tom's home that morning, the atmosphere was tense. Tom had been living in a state of emotional turmoil for months, isolated from his work and friends, consumed by thoughts of betrayal and revenge. His once orderly life had crumbled into chaos after learning about Natalie's affair, and the murder of Jack had been the breaking point. He offered little resistance when the police arrived at his door, his face hollow from weeks of sleepless nights and despair. During the interrogation, Tom confessed to the murder, but his confession wasn't as straightforward as the police had expected. While he admitted to killing Jack, the details he provided shocked everyone. Tom claimed that he hadn't acted alone, that he had been pushed into committing the crime by Rachel Evans. According to Tom, it was Rachel's jealousy and resentment toward Jack that had driven him to kill. He alleged that Rachel had called him repeatedly in the weeks leading up to the murder, reminding him of Jack's betrayal and urging him to take action. In his mind, Rachel had planted the seeds of revenge, constantly feeding his anger until he felt he had no choice but to make Jack pay for what he had done. Tom described how each call from Rachel had intensified his hatred for Jack. She had painted Jack as the villain, the man who had destroyed both their lives. Tom, already fragile from the collapse of his marriage, began to believe that Rachel was right. His rage and jealousy consumed him, pushing him to the brink. And on March 6, 2012, that rage exploded into violence. He had gone to Jack's house, fueled by a mixture of pain and anger, and in a fit of uncontrollable emotion, he had stabbed him. Tom's confession, however, wasn't enough to implicate Rachel. Despite his claims that she had orchestrated the murder, there was no solid evidence linking her directly to the crime. The police had searched Rachel's phone records and questioned her extensively, but they found nothing that could definitively prove she had encouraged Tom to kill Jack. She denied everything, insisting that while she had been heartbroken and angry about Jack's affair, she had never urged Tom to commit such an act. By the time Tom's confession was complete, the police were left with a tangled web of accusations and half-truths. While they had enough to charge Tom with the murder, Rachel's involvement remained uncertain. Was Tom telling the truth, or was he trying to shift the blame for his own actions? The investigation had reached a critical point, but the answers were still elusive. By July 2013, Tom's case went to trial. The courtroom was packed, with the media and local community eagerly following every development. The murder of Dr. Jack Matthews, a beloved figure in Austin, had shocked the city, and the revelation that his death had been the result of a sordid affair involving 3 different women made the case even more sensational. Everyone wanted to know how the trial would unfold, who would be held accountable, and whether Rachel Evans, whose name had been dragged through the mud, would face of her own. The prosecution, led by a seasoned attorney, painted Tom as a man driven to madness by the betrayal of his wife. They presented him as a once successful businessman whose world had been shattered by the affair, leaving him emotionally unhinged. The evidence was damning. Tom's fingerprints on the murder weapon, the threatening messages to Jack, and his own confession left little room for doubt. The prosecution's argument was simple. Tom had acted out of jealousy and rage, unable to cope with the destruction of his marriage. However, Tom's defense team took a different approach. They pushed the narrative that Rachel had manipulated Tom into committing the murder. They argued that Rachel, consumed by her own jealousy over Jack's relationship with Natalie, had used Tom as a pawn to exact her revenge. They highlighted Tom's fragile mental state, claiming that he had been vulnerable and easily influenced by Rachel's bitterness. The defense painted Rachel as a woman scorned, someone who couldn't bear to see Jack with anyone else, and who had found a way to eliminate him without getting her own hands dirty. Throughout the trial, Rachel's life was placed under intense scrutiny. Every detail of her relationship with Jack was dissected, her emotions and actions questioned at every turn. Although she continued to deny any involvement in the murder, the accusations had left her reputation in tatters. The media portrayed her as the other woman, a manipulative force behind the scenes who had orchestrated the entire tragedy. Even though there was no concrete evidence against her, the whispers of her guilt lingered in the public consciousness. The emotional toll of the trial was immense. Tom, who had once been a respected businessman, sat in the courtroom looking defeated, his life in ruins. Natalie, whose affair had set the entire chain of events into motion, was also present, though her relationship with Tom had long since ended. She too was grappling with the guilt of what her actions had caused, and Rachel, the woman at the center of the defense's argument, struggled to maintain her composure as her name was dragged through the mud. In September 2013, after weeks of testimony and cross-examination, the jury reached its verdict. Tom was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The weight of the sentence was crushing, but it was the inevitable outcome for a man who had taken another's life in a fit of rage. While Tom's fate was sealed, Rachel's story was far from over. Though she was not convicted of the murder, she faced a separate trial for charges of incitement, accused of pushing Tom to commit the crime. The trial that followed was long and grueling, with Rachel continuing to maintain her innocence. She insisted that while she had been angry and hurt by Jack's betrayal, she had never wanted him dead. However, the damage to Rachel's life had already been done. The accusations alone had destroyed her reputation, leaving her ostracized by friends and family. Even if she were to walk free, life as she knew it would never be the same. The trial had peeled back layers of raw emotion, jealousy, obsession, betrayal, exposing the darkest depths of human nature. It left a scar on everyone involved, a permanent reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded. Tom's actions didn't just take Jack's life, they had effectively destroyed his own, leaving Rachel behind to pick up the shattered pieces of what remained of her world. Dr. Jack Matthews, once the charming and talented doctor whose presence lit up the lives of many, had become a tragic figure in a cautionary tale of love turned dark. His story, now etched in the memories of a community that had once admired him, would forever be remembered not for his brilliance or potential, but for the chilling obsession that ultimately cost him his life. Natalie, whose affair ignited the chain of events, divorced Tom and moved away in search of a fresh start. But the guilt of her choices, the role she played in setting the tragedy in motion, followed her like a shadow, always present no matter how far she ran. Rachel, a once hopeful single mother, had sought love but now faced years in prison, trapped in the consequences of a tangled and deadly web. The story of love, lust, and obsession left a haunting imprint on the community, a stark reminder of how fragile human hearts can be and how easily darkness can slip into even the brightest lives.